some, interesting news and news that was kind of swept under the rug, or at least for me, maybe that's my own ignorance focusing on baseball and other things. But we did see Jamison Williams, the second year man, coming out and really ready to make his presence known this year in Detroit. Well, that's not going to happen. He has been suspended for the 2023-24 season for gambling. Now, I didn't dive too deep into the specifics and things like that. It's kind of harder to get, and not a whole lot of the news that I did see was not from ones that I'm willing to source here. So we do know he is suspended for gambling. Now, we're not going to talk about that, and maybe we will, but the main question I have for all of us is the influx of sports books in the NFL. And now we see the lines on the scores, the scoreboards, all that stuff. The over-under is, now readily talked about on these TV shows. Is it now hypocritical for the NFL, who has now gotten into bed with these sports books, to make to essentially penalize an entire season? Now, once again, I do want to point out Deshaun Watson was under investigation at the very least for over 20 sexual assaults with 20 different females, over 20. I don't know the exact number. And he got 13 games or 11 games. And Calvin Ridley and Jamison Williams are suspended for betting on the NFL, or at least gambling on games they weren't a part of. That's the other thing I want to throw out there. This isn't a Pete Rose situation where, Jamison Williams is betting on games that he played in. That's not the case. Calvin Ridley, same thing, not the case. But in terms of just doing what most people do, betting on football or betting on sports that he's not involved in, it seems a little hypocritical in my view, but I'd love to get my co-host thoughts. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the gambling situation in football?
Not unlike horse racing, which you and I discuss on a regular basis, and they've come up with the Safety and Integrity Act to protect the horses. And even at that, it went through the Senate. Got all stamped. Everything was good, but it's still just floundering out there. So what you have is Santa Anita runs one way, Del Mar runs one way, Churchill Downs runs another way, Aqueduct runs another way. Everybody's got their own little rule book. There's not one blueprint that everybody's operating off of. And I think this is what's happening with the NFL and the gambling thing. I think they have a detailed yet still very loose set of rules. And do they just throw a handbook to the owners and say, make sure your administration tells these players what they're supposed to do? My understanding is none of these guys were betting on NFL games. They were betting on sporting events. And the real violation was, hey, we're not telling you you can't bet on sporting events. We're telling you don't do any gambling while you're in the confines of an NFL facility, be it a stadium, a locker room, a training facility, whatever it may be. And if that's the case, and these guys know that, well, they're big boys. And guess what? If that's what you still think you're going to do and get away with it, I'd like to know how the NFL found out about it.
I'll just interject real quick, Raider Jim. You're hitting it in the nail on the head. It was actually college football games in the Lions practice facility. And I believe that's probably how they got that, but sorry to interject, but just to give some more background.
No. But again, it's like, how did they identify these guys? And the one cat from Washington.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to me, because I'm not believing with all these players out there and coaches for that matter, they're the only 5. No, they're the 5 that got caught.
Right.
That's somebody fingered them, and that was it.
Yeah. And I also do want to amend something. I do apologize. This suspension is for 6 games. I'm just kind of getting caught up on this is the sporting news, somewhere I do feel a little more comfortable sourcing. But yes, and you also brought up another great point, Raider Jim. This was, I think, 5 or 6 players, and Jamison Williams is by far the most high profile. But it's just 6 games. Also did want to amend that. But yeah, college football games inside the Lions practice facility. And that may be the kind of the asterisk or the reason why this is happening, because I agree with you, Raider Jim. 5 out of what? I don't know the numbers, but at least 1,000. Because I mean, you look 10 easy, 1,500 players, maybe more. And only 5 of them are betting on sports. I find that very, very hard to believe, especially with the type of money we're talking, even on the low end, still a lot of money. But it may be a situation of you go home and you hop on your gambling site of choice. You're okay as long as you stay away from the NFL. That's fine. And I do believe Calvin Ridley did get the full year because he actually did bet on NFL games. Once again, not the games he was a part of, but NFL games. So just trying to clear that up. Apologies. Didn't have all my ducks in the row. But Coach, what are your thoughts on the gambling situation in the NFL?
When you're going through that introduction of this topic, hypocritical was the first word that started flashing in my head. Yeah, and it's on the NFL, and it's on those owners that are full of secrets anyway, that are always, blackmailing each other, or the outgoing owner of a team, trying to silence him and all the skeletons he has in his book of secrets against each other, So, when it comes down to it, it's those 32 owners that got to clean up their act. And I guess you could kind of look at it as a trickle-down effect. As far as all that stuff that happens off the field, these guys run amok. They throw their money around. They buy their way out of things. They make up rules. They don't follow them. And, they get into bed with these sites. And how can you not, want to be interested in some kind of gambling, whether it's your sport, whether it's on the college side or the pro side or any other sport? I mean, March Madness and pools and fantasy footballs, just like that fantasy football league Tommy Pham was in. That's a $10,000 league, right? I mean, at some point, it's legalized gambling. So, for the NFL to be this loose or this taxing, I guess, on their athletes in regards to gambling, I, as a fan, if I was a fan of one of these players, I'd want to know why why. The number of games is what it is, and is there something written in detail between those teams? It's not out there, it's not out there. Where, let's take for instance MLB's new rule changes. They're all out there, right? They
got commercials about them. They got commercials promoting their new rules.
Yeah, but with these NFL owners and these teams in regards to gambling, there's not like a set of rules as far as what, I'm not just gambling, but just a set of rules that are visible for the unsuspecting fan or that fanatic fan to understand. So, clean it up, I guess, or don't be so sloppy and have your guys be sloppy, because those players are their guys, and for what it is, it takes the fun out of it for those guys, and I'm sure it puts a question mark around those other guys that didn't get caught. Right. What can be expected and whatnot. But like, I had no idea until you guys said it, that it's in the confines of the NFL. Well, what else is the confines? The training facility down the road, the stadium during game days. What else? The
hotel they put you up in on the road. Where is it in?
Yeah, exactly. The hotel they put you up in on the road, or the hotel and banquet hall that they have to host team awards and whatnot. So as a fan of the game, cool, you're cleaning it up. If I was a fan of those individuals, I'd be really upset, or disappointed. But when it all comes down to it, it comes down from the ownership down, and until they decide to do something or clean up their act or just, clarify, it's kind of like, be careful, players, because they're going to get you, regardless of it's within the rules or in the confines or not. It's kind of one of those things. I mean, losing Ridley last year for the Falcons, I'm sure that was a huge blow.
Yeah.
Jamison Williams, huge blow, right? So
yeah. It's
I don't have details on the whole thing. I'm not saying they're not available. I just have not had the time to invest and find out. But it just seems to me, so is this a first time infraction for everybody? And what is the rule state for that? Is it a dollar amount? Is that what does it? I mean, you think back, you look at, and again, this is an individual athlete, but you look at the money that Roger Mayweather throws around at the casinos when he's betting on things. You think about these legendary bets on the golf course that you hear about Michael Jordan used to make, and things like that. And the NFL puts a franchise in Vegas. So you're telling me that I'm not going to be able to walk around Vegas from Thursday through Saturday night and find players hanging out at the sports book or anywhere else at the tables, and they're not gambling? Come on. Let's be real, folks. So again, put it out there, put the the rules out there, the protocol, and let everybody know what it is, and explain yourselves. Why did it have to be the way it is?
Yeah, for me, it kind of reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. At the end where they finally meet the wizard, and they think it's going to be this grand, incredible, and it's just a dude behind the screen with a projector and whatever. I think Toto brings the curtain, and they see it for what it is. And I do kind of feel like it's the NFL saying, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain," because you moved a team to Vegas, which is fine. I think that stadium's beautiful. It's done great, and obviously the NHL was the first one to quote unquote dip their toe in that pool that it'd been there, but it always had this stigma. And you put a team there, and like you said, you can't expect a road team or even a home team. It's not like these guys have property in Vegas. They're probably staying at the MGM. They're probably staying at whatever hotel that's probably, I don't even know about, and not expect them to go enjoy what Vegas has to offer, especially with the money that they have.
Right.
And it for me, I dove in to a little deeper and looked at the sponsorships and what type of money the NFL is getting from certain sponsors. And it did actually surprise me that sports betting over at least last year was second in terms of money. Technology, very vague, but I didn't have time to dive into it. But technology was at 400 million. Then you had the sports books coming in at 260 million. Then you had beer, telecom, and insurance rounding out the top five. That is from sportico.com. So if you have any problems with that, log on to that site, talk to them, not me. But the fact of the matter is, the second most amount of money coming into the NFL from sponsors is from essentially a brand or a business that you don't want your players to be a part of. And I'll take it a step further. There may be others, but I do know of at least one player who has a sponsorship with MGM, and to no surprise, it's Davante Adams playing for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'm not, boo-hooing him or whatever. That's not the point of this. But the point of it is you now have Davante Adams as the face of, or the sports side of it. Yet he can't use it, or he can't use it here and there. It seems a little, give me the money, don't ask questions. Very heavy-handed, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain type stuff. So I think hypocritical is probably the most diplomatic thing you can say about this. I think there needs to be, like you both said, clarity. We need to know what these guys were betting on. I mean, when Pete Rose, and I wasn't alive when this happened, but when the Pete Rose thing came out, they knew pretty quickly he bet on games he managed. He never bet against his team. It came out, and we're talking about not a sports or not a media culture that we live in now, where the minute something breaks, every big thing has it. It was a little more, rudimentary back then, but they knew. So the clarity, I think, is a big factor for this going forward. But who knows? Ideally, we don't see this anymore. Or, these players get a little more smart, because I'm not going to sit here and tell 2,000 players, first of all, it's your right. Well, I guess in some states it's your right, but you can't do it here. I'm not going to tell them that. And I don't think the NFL, while they're taking hundreds of millions of dollars from these sports books, it's hard, I think, for them to not sound tone deaf by telling these players not to.